come on and needed to shut down their generator because they discovered an issue with the transfer switch. But regardless, it worked out in place. A plan worked. But National Grid did not hesitate to have crews that had to go into the woods, go through a swamp in order to reestablish connection as a result of this tier system that we had in place. So overall, from our experience, yes, there were some hardships, there were some shortfalls, but because of that communication, which was a key component for us, and the frustration of my public works people, because they have those assets. I started this off with saying that all emergencies start local. They have the assets, they have the licenses. I have a very aggressive director, Steve Matchek, and he has ensured that all of his crews are licensed. They're trained bucket operators, they're arborists. They work with heavy equipment. They have nearly every chainsaw classification there is, and could clearly have been utilized, and they were underutilized resource, which was his only frustration. But we were able to be one of 3 communities within the first 48 hours that were able to have complete access within the community. We couldn't send kids to school until day 3 of the storm because the community completely didn't have access, and we wanted to make sure it was safe. In fact, that was actually an ironic complaint from a parent that the schools were open before the power was restored, and as a result, they wanted to know how I was going to deal with that, and I simply couldn't answer that question for them. So, in conclusion, the community liaison portion, that project worked really well. We have since had a community meeting with Paul Stasiak, which has come and made himself available to us to answer any question. But the illustrations that National Grid had put out regarding the system was an eye-opening and a key factor in the understanding and most of the complaints that were received by the overall residents that I had to deal with. So aside from that, if anything, it ended up bringing West Greenwich and Exeter together in a unique way because Halloween was a concern. We actually had the owner of Dan's Place through efforts of the West Greenwich Police Chief, Rick Ramsey, put together a trunk and treat event which brought together over 150 families from both communities to provide a safe environment for the kids. And that worked out really well, and the parents were very appreciative that at least we were looking to and working with them on that level. So aside from that, primarily our messaging beyond Code Red. I hate to say it because I won't subscribe to it, but where social media was a big problem with me during Sandy, my library, Exeter Library, Amy Nielsen and her folks were able to message out and to send the updates from Paul Stasiak or from the grid directly to over 5,000 residents at any one given time from both communities. So I know I need to embrace it. I don't have a Facebook page myself. However, we're looking at those creative measures, and it's just better public education on our end in order for these new populations coming in. So aside from any questions, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Dawn Lewis.
Thank you. My name is Dawn Lewis. I represent the Hospital Association of Rhode Island, and I co-chair the Healthcare Coalition of Rhode Island. And I'd like to say that from the beginning, over the last decade, over the last decade that I've been in this position, we've had a very strong relationship with National Grid, working with our hospitals, health centers, and nursing homes and assisted living. I very much appreciate that, and we actually have a direct relationship with Lori and Jock and Paul and Marisa between them and the hospitals directly. They have that. The nursing homes had a little bit more difficulty actually getting a hold of National Grid. However, we believe in redundant communications in emergency preparedness. So they were able to contact the coalition, and we had direct and innumerable contacts between Marisa and the coalition in order to make certain that as hospitals or nursing homes or assisted livings were going offline or going on generator power, that we were able to reconnect them as quickly as possible. So 6 hospitals and 27 nursing homes did lose power during this during this storm. And several of them, they all had generator powers. They all were able to maintain a functional power system during the storm. And again, we feel like National Grid was very responsive, and Marisa in particular was very responsive to our needs. And that is all we'd like to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Todd Manning, Smithfield EMA.
Good evening. My name is Todd Manning, and I'm with the Smithfield Emergency Management Agency. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you this evening. I began in emergency management in 1994, and I became the director of Smithfield EMA in 2005. During my time at emergency management, I've experienced a number of powerful storms that resulted in the interruption of electrical services to the residents and the businesses of the town of Smithfield. This past nor'easter was a major storm for our community, and we suffered stunning worst-case scenario damage in the town of Smithfield. Numerous trees were brought down and limbs snapped. Utility poles were cracked in half. We lost transformers. With the exception of power substations, which fared very well, we experienced nearly all types of electrical utility damage for this past storm. The October 2017 nor'easter resulted in the largest power outage for the town of Smithfield since Tropical Storm Irene in 2011. I mentioned Tropical Storm Irene since the response from National Grid was so starkly different with this storm when you compare it to Hurricane Irene. Even with the long duration of the outage, the response was far more proactive than it was before. In comparison, Tropical Storm Irene was a restoration nightmare. In my opinion. It was tedious and it was a frustrating process to get people on the phone from National Grid, to get priorities transmitted over to National Grid, resubmitting these priorities. It was just a mess in plain English. During Irene, we tied up police officers for hours on watching down utility lines and that were still live for days on end. Since Tropical Storm Irene, though, significant improvements have been made when it relates to the coordination between communities and National Grid. Those improvements paid off this past storm, which was much more smoother than before. At 10 p.m. on Sunday, the beginning of the storm, I was able to get a person from National Grid on the phone without going through any robots. Dial the number and they picked up and answered. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I was on the phone with our community liaison, Laurie Spangler. Our community representative from National Grid specifically for the storm was in place by 10 o'clock in the morning. We had daily face-to-face meetings with this representative from National Grid, and she called into our conference calls in between these meetings. She deployed very, very quickly, and she also deployed the line monitors to our area so it freed up police officers so they could return to law enforcement duties. I can tell you with certainty that there has been a marked improvement with coordinated restoration between the community and National Grid. However, it did show that there was more work to be done. Moving forward and in the constant evolution of the preparedness process, there's some areas that we can work on with National Grid to make things better. First and foremost, there needs to be a better coordination between National Grid and other utility companies whose lines entangle with theirs and come down together. During the nor'easter, we had instances of one utility waiting for another utility to show up, and their efforts weren't in sync. This lack of coordination, or what appeared to be a lack of coordination, not only slowed down instances of restoration, but it also kept streets closed for a lot longer than we had anticipated. Second, the online power outage map has grown an invaluable tool to me as an emergency manager, but it's also grown an invaluable tool to residents as well. There is a high premium placed on the information that is provided by this restoration, and those estimated times were a little off during the entire storm, and that became a real issue. Not only did people get frustrated with times constantly moving forward, but we realized at the end, when all was said and done, that this is a computer-generated system and there's very little human contact and touch back with the estimated restoration times. So going forward, that's something that we need to look at. Third, the National Grid should provide a more granular view for the local emergency management agencies to be able to drill down a little bit further in the power outage map and get a little bit of more information, as well as a means to monitor priorities that we give National Grid. Fourth and lastly, we need to practice more. And I think that's one thing that's been reiterated time and time again between Public Works and Fire and Police, us in the world of emergency management. We need to practice more. For a host of reasons, storms have become greater in frequency and have a higher impact. When I started in emergency management, we didn't talk a whole lot about storms and power outages the way that we talk about it now. I think that we're seeing a new normal emerge as it relates to the frequency and impact of storms. We need to drill and exercise more with National Grid on outages, as well as those emergencies which emerge from brownouts and on high demand days. We need to harmonize our local plans that support more rapid restoration with National Grid and provide the opportunity as it relates to consequence management training and go deeper in that. I am very, very confident, though, that with the changes made since Tropical Storm Irene and what we will learn from this process now will make us better in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last person signed up, Kat French.
Hello. I spent 36 years living 40 minutes from the Canadian border. Absolutely. I spent 36 years living 40 minutes from the Canadian border. Each winter, you could count on losing power a few times every winter, from a couple days to 3 weeks at a time. Under no circumstances did we blame the utility. The last I knew, the weather is an act of nature. I know in not all circumstances, but this was. It was also predicted that the winds were a lot lower than actually happened. I was always prepared in any case. If I knew I was going to lose power, I put water in my bathtub so I could flush my toilet. I got ice if it was available. Okay, this storm, people could get out. Put ice in your refrigerators. Put it in your freezers. Unfortunately, who paid the price? The linemen. I know this because I had a dear friend lose his life. He's a lineman in Vermont. I made it a point to become very, very close and to friends with linemen, veterans, support them. Unfortunately, during this storm, a lot of these linemen were threatened with their lives. It was stated previously, I had to go higher up in order to get power in my area. There were a few political figures who did that. That's why they were called off in certain areas, why certain customers didn't get their power when they should have, because it matters who you are. Unfortunately, and I hate to go to this point, our own governor stated we should be able to flick a switch. That's not reality. And after that, and how I know, because I started a thank you lineman site on Facebook, social media. Also a thank you veteran site. People need to be accountable for themselves also, and not always easily to blame. I wish people, and I saw threats, I wish these people would look at these linemen who are working 16 and 18-hour days. We can go home long enough to get a little bit of rest. Many can't get a hot shower because they don't have power themselves, or their parents or their grandparents who are elderly, sick. People have to be accountable, take care of each other. Don't always point blame at people. But why don't you thank the guys? Thank any of these men you see on the road exhausted, tired. Or why don't you ask the ones who've lost somebody, their families, who have gone without a family dismember, who you can't just take a chainsaw, everybody. Go out and cut it. The first responders, firemen, policemen, they have to wait for the power work, the linemen, because you can't go around power lines. They actually have a thing that goes to schools called the live line trailer. They go to schools, police departments, fire departments to teach safety. That's been going on for years. I disagree that only after the storm they advertise. They advertise constantly positive teaching, education. So I really think it's sad. We're in a world of entitlement. We could prevent a lot of these issues by people. Okay, perfect example. Why you're called off? Okay, when people hit poles by being distracted, such, your power goes out. Your power will also go out. Sorry, I lost my thought. People get upset when they're trying to maintain to get the infrastructure better. They get upset when they say, we're going to have a scheduled outage. You might be out for an hour or so. These linemen get harassed constantly. How are you going to make the infrastructure better if you're going to have it turned off here and there? You're going to have to be inconvenienced. You might have to play with your children. You might have to get a candle, buy batteries, have them on hand anyways. I just think there needs to be more thanks and less blame. And I think actually National Grid does an incredible job, because I lived where, like I said, it just happens. I think they do a wonderful job, and I think these linemen need to be thanked. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have anyone else on the list. Is there anyone in the audience who would want to offer any comments? Seeing none, we can conclude here. I am not the decision maker, obviously, in this proceeding. I'm just a facilitator. But I will say this. These were some very profound, very powerful, very detailed, very thought-provoking comments. And that's both on the local and state official level. That's from the DPWs, the first responder communities, and yes, also the individual homeowners. Because I will hearken back to Tropical Storm Irene, when we held a somewhat similar review, and some of the most profound lessons we learned were unique circumstances that an individual homeowner living alone brought to our attention about a gap that we were missing, both as division, the utility, first responders, in terms of a communication. It was an important safety situation, and it was brought to light in this room, and I think it's largely been addressed. I think the very powerful comments on a wide range of things will be very useful to the division going forward as we deal with this docket, and I thank you all very much. Yes, this is on our website as docket D1745. That is ripuc.ri.gov. In this day and age, just you can Google RIPUC, and you'll find that. It's under division docket, so you can follow the documentation in that case. Also invite anyone who'd like to either expand on their comments, or anyone who might want to offer written comment after you've been here tonight to do so. We have on that web page the address you can send that to, but if all else fails, click on the bottom web link. It ends up going to me, and I'll get it to the right place. Okay, thank you.
I wonder, shell oil and try to manage resources. Every I'm sure doesn't have the same capability. When I said, Walter can do this, Paul could. And so you can't just say, and maybe there's some of that, and the room's just here, it's not, it looks like the same, but it's not. So, but if all those things are, to the extent they can be computerized locations, such things that you and I know they're there.